This island nation in the Pacific was the scene of some of the deadliest fighting during the Second World War. Names like Corregidor and Bataan are synonymous with the conflict. And it was here in the Philippines where General Douglas MacArthur delivered one of history's most famous promises.
I shall return.
Today, 40 years later, the Philippine Islands are once again the focal point of world attention. And what happens here over the next several days might very well affect both the economic and political stability of the entire region. The Philippines are facing some very serious dilemmas. The most acute is economic. In recent years, this nation has experienced a declining gross national product, high inflation, and a rising national debt. While some of these problems appear to have begun to be addressed, the fact is they are far from being solved. The economic mood here ranges from slight glimmers of hope to deep pessimism. This concern certainly exists in the international investment community. A number of corporations have recently pulled out of the country completely. Many others are cautiously watching the outcome of this election. Some of the economic problems have been due to a collapse of the world market prices for several of the nation's main export crops, such as sugar and copper. But government monopolies and continued governmental interference in the open marketplace have severely affected any potential economic recovery. Secondly, there appears to be a widespread lack of confidence in the Marcos administration. This has intensified over the last 3 years since the assassination of Benigno Aquino, the major opposition leader of the president. Thirdly, there are concerns over a continued growth of communist insurgency known as the New People's Army, or the NPA. Its growth can be partly attributed to the continuing political and economic problems. Well, those are the main issues in this election. The campaigns of the two candidates have been as different as the individuals themselves. Ferdinand Marcos, the incumbent, directing his drive for re-election from Malacanang Palace, the Philippine version of the White House. At rallies, he rarely comes in direct contact with his supporters, desiring instead to rely on his oratorical skills, which are quite adequate. Corazón Aquino, on the other hand, is a people's candidate, seemingly comfortable working the crowds. She's certainly not an electrifying speaker, but her sincerity is openly evident. Her motorcades were a familiar sight as they crisscrossed this nation. Mrs. Aquino, or Cory as she is called, seems a rather unlikely person for this sort of thing. She has, however, continued to pound away on one point throughout the campaign.
Well, the issue is Mr. Marcos himself and 20 years of Marcos misrule. And the people just want to have a chance for a change. And I suppose this is what I appear to offer them, a hope, because I really cannot offer more than that since Marcos has devastated our country. But if we can just stop all of the Marcos devastation and then be given the chance to start all over again, I think this is what the people are asking for and are going to vote for.
I posed this question to your opposition, and she said that the issue in this election is you.
Well, yes and no. The issue is me in the sense that they think that they can do better. They think that we have not accomplished much. They think that the government is corrupt, and the purpose of the election should be to place a new government that would be capable of changing all of this.
The campaign has become extremely emotional during the final weeks, sometimes even dividing families. Mrs. Aquino's biggest political liability may have been a statement she made that if elected, she would welcome communists into her government. A statement that didn't sit well with many Filipinos who were among the staunchest pro-democratic people to be found anywhere. I asked Mrs. Aquino about that remark.
If these people will come down, first of all, will lay down their arms, will renounce all forms of violence, will pledge allegiance to the new government, I believe that there should be a free market of ideas. And let the Filipino people decide, because I'm so confident the Filipinos will never accept communism. And that's why I have been saying this all along. It must have been difficult for Americans to think, or maybe they thought me so naive that I would believe that the communists could possibly, you know, change their way of thinking. But I have to explain, many of these people who are now with the communists and who are probably labeled as communists are not really so. It's just that they are anti-Marcos and there is no place for them under the Marcos regime.
Meanwhile, Mrs. Aquino has been adamant in her contention that President Marcos is nothing but a corrupt dictator, and no matter what he says, will never be anything else.
If there are any instances of corruption, I'd like to know. Or if my family is blamed for this, I'd like to see the evidence. In the investigation going on in the subcommittee of Congressman Solar's, they haven't been able to obtain any evidence of hidden wealth or of corruption or improper use of government aid from the United States, that the auditing office has come out with a clean bill of health.